3:15:24, Rome, Italy. Entry 1. As an archaeologist, I've seen my fair share of ancient texts. Still, I knew this was different when my fingers brushed against the wooden-covered manuscript. Once golden color, the faded script whispered of a bygone era where the world was young and the mysteries lurked around every corner. The manuscript, I soon learned, belonged to Valerius, a fallen nobleman who had once walked the halls of Rome as a beloved son, but now resided in the catacombs beneath them. His life forever changed by the creature known only as Rexmortum. As I read further, Valerius's words painted a vivid picture of the horrors he had faced in the catacombs, the treasures he had found, and the lost allies. His words seemed to echo through the tunnels, and I couldn't help but feel a shiver down my spine. Something was haunting about his tale, as if the memories of his past were reaching out from the very pages, trying to warn me of the dangers ahead. I have translated the text into easy-to-understand English. Here is the translated manuscript. The commoners and priests whispered the creature's name, Rexmortum, fearfully. It was said to be a guardian of the dead, protecting the souls of the departed from those who dared to disturb their eternal rest. But to me, it was nothing more than a tool of fate, a creature that had changed my life forever. My name is Valerius Florus Decius, and only 5 years ago I was brushing shoulders with senators and emperors alike. I held a high position on the emperor's council until I let my addictions get the best of me. Gambling was my obsession, and I let it take my life from me. I had lost all my money and owed a lot of influential people a lot of money. As a result, my family banished me, stripping me of all titles and property. I now live amongst the same people I once held in contempt. I turned to grave robbing about 3 years ago, when I realized that manual labor is not in my bones. It's the easiest and quickest way to make money. The catacombs beneath the city are filled with treasures of the long dead and forgotten. The nobles and wealthy families used to bury their valuables with their loved ones, thinking that it would protect them in the afterlife. But the truth is, they only ever attracted unwary treasure hunters like me. I had done more jobs than I could count grave robbing. I've heard every myth and legend about the perils of the job. The monsters who lurk in the shadows unseen, waiting for some poor robber to devour. I knew they weren't real. They were for the uneducated to scare them out of robbing the precious jewels from noble families. I'm writing this manuscript to tell my story before it finally gets me. To warn any other grave robbers about falling into the arrogant disbelief that these things do not exist. They do. And this is my story. One day, I was hired to loot the tomb of a noble family. The tomb was not lavishly decorated like some of the others I'd been in, and I could tell that it had been an easy target since there were never any guards at it, leaving it wide open. I had brought with me 2 men, all of them trusted and experienced. We hadn't bothered to make a plan since this seemed so easy, so we headed into the crypt. The air was thick with the smell of death and decay. The light from our torches flickered weakly against the walls, casting eerie shadows. We made our way through the maze of crypts, each more decrepit than the last. After what seemed like an eternity, we finally found the sarcophagus we sought. The stone was carved with intricate designs and held a large emerald at its center. The men I had brought began to pry open the coffin, their muscles straining under the weight. As they worked, I took out my tools and started to search the area around the coffin, looking for any other valuables that might be hidden. It was then that I heard a low growl coming from the shadows. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It sounded like the lions I had seen as a boy. This lion had to be at least twice the size of any of those, though. The 2 men freeze in fear at the sound of this.
Rexmortum,
one of the men says.
By the gods, it has to be,
the other man said with a shaky voice. The first man stood for a second before sprinting out into the maze of the catacombs. I could hear screams that turned from fear to absolute fright, and suddenly, a roar echoed through the labyrinth, followed by a gargled scream. Something had devoured him. I stood frozen in fear, unable to move as the second man slowly backed away from the coffin. His eyes were wide with fear, and I could feel my heart racing. There was a sudden silence as we looked at each other, keeping our senses heightened. "What is that beast? A lion?" I asked.
"No, what? It's Rexmortum, the guardian of the dead. It guards the tombs of families loyal to him in life,"
he whispered. "No, it has to be some kind of animal."
"Then how is it so quiet? How does it stay alive down here? If it were an animal, it would need food and fresh water, which are not here. It survives from the greed of people like us, so it waits however long it takes for someone greedy enough to steal from the dead,"
he said sternly. My mind was racing. I had never encountered anything like this beast. "How do we stop it?" I asked. He looks defeated and down at his feet.
"We don't. Once it has our scent, it'll stalk you until you either lose your way down here and die of hunger or thirst, or it gets to you first and devours you. The only thing we can do is slow it down by keeping light all around us. Light holds it at bay since it can only travel in the darkness. So as long as we keep the light around us, we should be good."
"Okay. We will find our way out of here. We will make sure that both of us use our torches to keep the light in front and back of us at all times, and we will find a way out, I promise," I say reassuringly. He hesitantly agreed, as he had no other choice but to give himself to the creature. We moved forward, and every time we turned a corner, I expected the beast to spring out at us, but it didn't. It seemed content to follow us from a distance, waiting for an opportunity to strike. That messed with me the most. This thing could be right in front or behind us, just watching our every move. I was starting to feel a breeze, which told me we were close to an exit. I picked up my pace out of urgency until I heard the man behind me trip and fell onto his front side. I turned around and saw the torch before him, swiftly fading as the sand it fell on was extinguishing it. As his face slowly faded into the shadows behind me, I heard the growl again, followed by the sound of the man being dragged further into the shadows as he screamed desperately, begging me to help, but I stood frozen in fear. I could hear his teeth gnawing on his flesh and basking in its kill as he roared. Suddenly, the sound stopped and he was deafeningly silent. I didn't hear him walk away, so I could only assume that he was standing there in the shadows again. I realized that I had never heard footsteps, only the sound of his growl and roar. That's how I was able to get so close to us undetected. I thrust my torch in front of me and slowly started walking backward until I heard his growl behind me. It had moved into the darkness that my torchlight could not reach. Frantically, I swung my torch back and forth, ensuring I kept light everywhere around me as I started walking fast toward where I was feeling the breeze. My torch was beginning to fade, and I sprinted as I threw the torch behind me. The breeze was getting stronger, but the growls of this thing was also growing closer. I could hear its firm footsteps getting closer also. It had been completely quiet when moving, so it must have been trying to scare me by making its footsteps known. Finally, I could see a tiny bit of light. It wasn't the entrance we had taken in, so I didn't know the breeze was coming from a small hole in a caved-in entrance. I frantically clawed at the hole until I could squeeze my body out of it. When I finally wiggled out, I could hear the creature yelling and roaring louder than before, as if it were upset that I got away. I can't tell you how great the relief felt when I saw the light from outside. I started sobbing as I realized what could have been down there. I decided to clean myself up and go back to bed. I immediately fell asleep, and when I woke up, the sun was already gone. The darkness makes me feel uneasy, as if that creature were still watching me. This continued every night for the next few weeks until I heard a growl one night. I recognized it immediately, and my heart dropped. It was here, watching me this whole time, and it had been taunting me. The other night, I decided to go into the shadows to prove to myself that it wasn't just my mind playing tricks on me. That's when it reached out, and gripped my arm like I was a bug in the hands of a curious child. When I got free, I lunged back onto the floor and assessed my injury. My arm was broken, along with my ability to keep going. I can't take it anymore. I will give myself to him tonight. I can't take the uncertainty, so I will willingly give myself up. Death has to be better than this. I apologize if the wording is a little wonky, as my translating skills are not the best. So that's Valerius, the grave-robbing folk storyteller. I have to admit that the creativity of his story is vastly better than anything else I'd read from that period. Grave robbing disgusts me, and I hated it when people called us archaeologists that name. There is a stark difference between us, and I hold disdain for anyone making the comparison. Last week, we were able to confirm that at least the catacombs that were mentioned do exist, and they do house a noble family. We hope to find the catacomb that Valerius experienced this in, and if we are correct, we will be able to excavate the graves of a noble family. The amount of artifacts that will be there is making me giddy with excitement. Tomorrow, we will begin breaking ground in excavations. 3/16/24, Rome, Italy, Entry 2. There are more artifacts in that tomb than I could have ever imagined. It's amazing how no one ever discovered all this in a millennia. We found jewelry, some scrolls that were somewhat still intact, and what we would call a gravestone were still in excellent condition. I have been in contact with the Italian government for hours. We will ship 2 tons of artifacts at the end of the weekend to be examined and authenticated. This discovery might just put me in the textbooks. 3/17/24, Rome, Italy, Entry 3. I didn't get a lick of sleep last night, but it wasn't from exhaustion. I think I read Valerius' letter too many damn times because I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched from the shadows. I had terrible dreams when I was actually able to sleep, but they would wake me up in a cold sweat. I was able to make a few phone calls in between naps and catching up on sleep. Tomorrow we are sending the shipment to the Italian government, and hopefully they will let us keep the scrolls for examination. I'm unsure if it's just a jet lag or if I'm still shaking from the dreams, but I can't focus. I wish I hadn't read that damn letter again. Laying in bed, I still can't shake the feeling of being watched. I could have sworn that I heard a low, guttural growl as I was slipping into sleep earlier. I haven't been able to sleep since then. Was Valerius telling the truth? Or is my mind playing tricks on me? 3/18/24, Rome, Italy, Entry 4. It's here with me now. I can feel its presence and hear its growl every hour. It's playing with me like it did to Valerius. No, it's not real. This work is just stressing me out. We weren't able to send the artifacts as all of the trucks they were going to send broke down, and now we are waiting for them to figure out how to get new trucks. I need for this to be over. I need to be home in my bed, away from all of this. It just growled again. 3/19/24, Rome, Italy, Entry 5. I can't take it. I'm not getting any sleep, and now the Italian government is making us pay for the new trucks. What makes them think my team can afford that? I had to dip into my personal savings, but we are doing it. The trucks will arrive tomorrow, and I will be on a plane home. This fucking thing is watching me. I can't deny it anymore. I think I saw it earlier when I first laid down as it slipped back into the shadows like I had caught a kid doing something it shouldn't. From the small amount I saw, it was huge and had thick jet black fur, like a black bear, but much bigger. I don't know how it stays in the shadows with its size or so quiet, only letting you hear what it wants you to. 3/20/24, London, England, Entry 6. What a nightmare that was. Now that I'm away, reading that last entry made me laugh for a second, and then I laid down in my bed and couldn't bring myself to turn off the light. The dread was there still, and it was still watching me in my own fucking bedroom. There was no doubt about it anymore. It followed me home just like Valerius, but why me? Did this creature really hold me to the same regard as that villainous grave robber?
My work was different. It was about the history and not the money or fame or recognition. Suddenly, it pops out of the shadows, reaching as it roared, trying to grab me but slicing my forearm as I put my hands up to defend myself. It stung so bad as it gushed with blood. I couldn't help but feel like Valerius, how he'd gone through the same thing. I'd felt so superior to him and his people. Now here I am in the same predicament. I have no choice but to accept my fate. Tonight, I shall walk into the shadows for the last time. I can't take this anticipation, waiting for it to strike. So, this is my last entry on this earth. I have to post this somewhere to tell my story. I don't expect anyone to believe this, but here it is. It can sense my resolve. I feel it. Its growl is growing louder in anticipation. Norman Fletcher.